All right, good morning, everyone. I wanted to welcome you all on behalf of Thrive, the Alliance of Nonprofits for San Mateo County, as well as on behalf of the Social Impact Advisory Group. My name is Georgia Farouk, and I am Executive Director of Thrive Alliance. And I am here with my colleague, Petra Silton, our Director of Advocacy and Education, and also Maya Tusing, who will be your moderator today and who is one of the co-founders of the Social Impact Advisory Group. You can see that we have a mix of people here today if you've been looking at the chat. So I just wanted to mention that, for Thrive members, a special welcome to you, for Thrive board members, for Social Impact Advisory Group members, our cross-sector partners from the government sector and from the private sector, and also to the American Leadership Forum Senior Fellows who came today to help represent the corporate sector. So all of you in attendance today bring unique perspectives which help enrich our conversation. I also wanted to thank Innovate Public Schools for enabling us to have this event translated. Thank you for helping bring that to us today. That's wonderful. And then we have supporters that we want to acknowledge, particularly Pacific Gas and Electric is our sponsor for the Thrive SIAG Recovery Series, and many of you have been in attendance at our events, everything from grassroots community organizing to ways that we can come together around virtual fundraising. So this is part of that series. Today's topic is the digital divide in Silicon Valley's backyard, how we can achieve equitable access for all. And we have a PowerPoint, I'm not sure, there it is. So for all of you that don't know Thrive, we're an alliance of nonprofits for San Mateo County. We have a membership of over 200 that is cross-sector, and that is why we're looking to kind of deepen the conversation on the digital divide today and bring all those voices together. Thrive has been partnering with the County of San Mateo on the recovery efforts. And here are just a couple of the things that we've been doing. I wanted to highlight, I think, the most, relevant thing right now. We've launched a partnership with the Office of Community Affairs to work with nonprofits to get important messages around safety and resources into the most vulnerable communities. So we are we're working as community action team coordinators to work with those nonprofits that are working in the community. As you all know, this is a difficult time, and we want to acknowledge that. And we know just with our own staff, our own membership, our own community members, that right now in particular, many people are grappling with illness, job loss, and hunger, so many other things that we just wanted to kind of acknowledge that today, that even though we're in the holidays, that this is a very difficult time for so many people. But we do have resources. I encourage you, if you know a nonprofit that should be in touch with us, let them know that we do have resources about how they can help the community. We also, as you can see, we have resources on our webpage. We're doing many events around, bringing community leaders together to talk to us about resources. So that we will be following up with you. We sent you some resources in advance, and we will follow up with you and send you more resources. I also wanted to, before that, I just wanted to thank our general operating sponsors, supporters that help make Thrive educational forums possible, including Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Packard Foundation, Silicon Valley Community Foundation, Sobrato Family Foundation, and Sunlight Giving. They all provide general operating support to us that helps us bring these programs to you. And then finally, we have this event coming up. You can go back to the last slide. Thank you. And this is exciting. We have special guest Josh Becker, State Senator-elect Josh Becker, coming as our keynote speaker for our annual holiday mix and mingle, which is traditionally a Meet Your Legislative Aides event. And we will be featuring many of our local legislative aides. We will follow up again with a link and with resources if you're interested in attending. And yesterday, yes, so no longer Senator-elect, now State Senator Josh Becker. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Maya Tusing. We have an incredible group of speakers today, and we have, I think, a way that we're going to get everyone's voice heard today and hopefully have a great conversation with our attendees as well. Maya, thank you for helping organize this, and looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Georgia. Thank you, Petra, for being great partners. Welcome all to the Social Impact Advisory Group's virtual panel series in collaboration with Thrive. First, a little bit about who I am. I'm a partner and co-founder of Fairlight Advisors, and we provide endowment, investment management, retirement plans, and financial consulting to purpose-driven organizations to help fund their mission effectively. My partner, Catherine Earhart, and I, Catherine, who's also on this call today, organized the Social Impact Advisory Group with others like ourselves who serve social impact organizations and nonprofits as consultants, board members, donors, and public officials to bring increased awareness to their needs and promote stability and strength for the sector. If you're interested in hearing more about Social Impact Advisory Group's events, please follow the link that Catherine will put in the chat about now to sign up for our updates. Well, today's topic was made very real to me, if not briefly, a few weeks ago when my middle school daughter and I were out of town. I was working virtually and she was attending remote school. The home we were working from had very poor Wi-Fi connection, and we panicked as my daughter was unable to dial into her first class. And when she did get in, the connection lagged, or online tools didn't work as they were supposed to, or she was kicked out of the virtual classroom altogether. The whole experience left her near tears, and both of us very frantic. But fortunately for us, we had options to improve our situation, like getting a Wi-Fi repeater or experimenting with different devices. I had the flexibility to move my meetings around, or if all else fails, we could have found a different location with a stronger signal. Well, that's not the case for many unfortunate families in the Bay Area and the broader United States who experience every single day what we experienced in one day. And these families don't often have the options to make things better. This state of affairs has a deleterious effect, domino effect on the social and economic well-being of many families. And so to discuss this and ways to relieve the digital divide in education, we brought together an incredible panel of experts who can tell us the impact today, what it feels like, what we need to do about it today and tomorrow. So I'm going to briefly introduce our panelists, and then they will introduce themselves in more detail when they get to their part of the discussion. We have Jose Talavera and Elena Arteaga, who are with Innovate Public Schools. We have Amina Fazlullah, Equity Policy Counsel from Common Sense Media. We have Paul Goodman, the Technology Equity Director from Greenlining Institute. We have John Walton, Chief Information Officer from the County of San Mateo. We have Nancy Poon, co-founder of Advanced Education Research and Development Fund. And we have Susan Walters, Senior Vice President for California Emergency Technology Fund. Welcome, panelists, and thank you for joining us. I want to start actually with Elena. Jose will translate for her, but I want to know, what does the digital divide feel like, and what is the effect on your family?
Hola, mi nombre es Elena Arteaga. Yo tengo dos hijos en el distrito de Redwood City. Uno va a quinto grado y la otra nena está en kindergarten. Durante este tiempo ha sido difícil lidiar con la tecnología, ya que en varias ocasiones tuvimos dificultades para ingresar a las clases debido a que los dispositivos digitales no estaban actualizados. El hotspot que se me dio en el distrito, me dijeron que era para soportar cuatro devices, lo cual pues no funcionaba porque no aguantaba ni siquiera con uno. No era suficiente. Tuvimos que cambiar el Chromebook de mi hijo en un par de veces, ya que cuando él se conectaba a la clase, había ciertas funciones que el Chromebook no tenía. Y debido a eso, él tenía problemas durante la clase. No funcionaban. Entonces, fui en varias ocasiones a cambiar el Chromebook al distrito. El distrito estuvo abierto a cambiarme los dispositivos. Y cuando fui al distrito pude notar que no era solo yo la que estaba haciendo una larga línea para cambiar los Chromebooks y los iPads de los niños, sino que había muchos padres con los problemas que yo tenía también. También con la tablet de mi hija que está en kindergarten, a ella también tuve que ir a cambiar su tablet en 2 ocasiones, porque las apps que ellos usaban a veces funcionaban y a veces no funcionaban. Entonces, ella no podía manejar bien las apps, pues está en kindergarten también por eso, pero sí era como muy difícil. Me preocupa que por el hecho de que estamos teniendo problemas con los dispositivos, mis hijos han perdido clases, porque cuando tuve que ir a cambiar los dispositivos, pues obviamente es tiempo y es tiempo de oficina y nosotros no podemos, pues no teníamos acceso a otro dispositivo en casa. Sí tengo un iPad que pertenece a mi casa, pero no tiene las herramientas que necesito para poder estar conectada en las clases con mis hijos. También debo reconocer de que el Distrito Escolar de Redwood City ha tenido las puertas abiertas para apoyar a las familias con los cambios de los dispositivos, pero los recursos que ellos mismos tienen son limitados y apoyar a toda la comunidad, pues al distrito se le hace difícil. Como les dije anteriormente, había muchos padres cambiando sus dispositivos. Me gustaría ver que estudiantes tengan dispositivos con mayor capacidad para que todos estos problemas no sigan ocurriendo en la comunidad.
So, thank you, Maria Elena. Hi, everyone. My name is Jose Talavera, Community Organizer for Innovate Public Schools. And Maria Elena is one of our parent leaders at Innovate. And Innovate is a nonprofit organization working to make sure that all the students, especially low-income students and students of colors, receive a world-class public education that prepares them for success in college, careers, and beyond. And Maria Elena is one of our wonderful parents that's been advocating for this world-class education for many years. So, and I will just translate what she said, and just we have it in a note. So it's wonderful that I'm able to translate this for you all. Hi, my name is Maria Elena. I have 2 kids in Redwood City School District in 5th grade and kindergarten. During this time has been difficult to deal with technology since in many occasions it's been difficult to log into the classes due to the technology that we have at home and the devices. Some of the devices that I was given were not ready to be able to do full distance learning from home. I received a hotspot to use in my house, but it wasn't enough to support the 4 devices that my kids were using at home. And I have to go to the district and change the Chromebooks because the Chromebook that was given to my kid wasn't working, and also the iPad that was given to my daughter was not enough to use all the features that she needed for classes. During this time, I had to change the iPad, Chromebook, and also I had to go to the district office to change all of this. I have to say that the district was pretty good on offering these services, and they were open to support the families on this. I have the privilege to have an iPad in my house, but that is not enough. to support my kids with the education, and I'm concerned that this will create a barrier for them to learn. I am concerned as well that the fact that we are having issues with all these devices that my kids are losing classes, and they're being affected in their academic progress. This is causing a lot of problems in equity, since the families in our communities don't have the necessary resources to be able to buy better computers, better iPads, and we cannot offer a better experience for our students and for our kids. I have to recognize that this Redwood City School District has been having the open doors to support the families and to change all these devices. The devices that have been having some issues. The resources that they have are limited, and to support all the community, it's hard to do. I would like to see students with better devices, students with better capacity and Wi-Fi hotspots that can support more devices in their home. I would like to see families with the capacity to provide better education for their kids in our communities. I would like to see different workshops for parents to learn how to use the technology and be tech savvy. Thank
Jose,
you so
could
much.
you kind
Yeah.
of share with us also a little of kind of what you're seeing as a community organizer? That is this, indicative of a lot of the people that you work with?
Yeah. So as a community organizer, I'm in communication with parents from all the schools from the district. And in a way, we've been working in San Jose, San Francisco, the Bay Area, and the Peninsula area in Los Angeles. And a lot of the conversations that we have with parents is about Wi-Fi connection. They have multiple devices at home, and the Wi-Fi might not be strong enough in their area or their community, or they might not be able to afford the most expensive or unlimited Wi-Fi they accessed to be able to have multiple devices at home. And of course, this is creating an issue of equity, because a lot of the kids, they're missing classes because probably their Wi-Fi is not strong enough, and they're going to be having a lot of lagging in the student meetings, or when they want to watch a video from the teacher or have these communications, a lot of the students are missing that they're not, some of them, their Wi-Fi just go down, and they're not able to, access again to the meeting, and devices as well, just for a lot. In our personal meetings, even for Innovate meetings, sometimes we have to adjust the way that we're doing translation for parents, because we know that Chromebook also has, they have a lot of limitations as well. So even if families have Chromebooks at home, they cannot use them as a computer. And kids, this is not creating a device just for the kids, but also for the families to be connected, not just for, teachers conference, but also for school board meetings where, the access to the information is limited for them. And this is creating a divide in our community.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Elena. I want to turn to Amina. You've been researching technology in education. How is it connected to the current state of virtual learning, and what did it look like before, and how is that changing?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Amina Fazlullah, and I'm with Common Sense Media. And our organization has been tracking the digital divide from the context of students and teachers and families for many years now. Semi-recently, in September 2019, we produced a report based off of our teacher census, which asked some questions around the digital divide and how it's impacting education back in September 2019. And what we found was that there was a distortion that was occurring, that even in schools that had adequate devices and training and and connectivity in the school when they knew a student didn't have access at home, even if they knew that there were, outside the home supports, like maybe libraries or other places where you could have access to the internet. Teachers avoided assigning homework that would require the internet. And so what you were seeing was this distortion in how we deliver education, because teachers were aware that this was an inequity that existed within their classroom. That's a waste of existing resources, but then also it demonstrated how, without taking care of the underlying program, which is that lack of home access, you would continue to see this distortion. And at the start of the pandemic, we also issued a report to do an analysis of what the distance learning digital divide looked like, because you no longer could rely on these public resources to connect students who didn't have home access. So, what would it look like to be able to scope out what the size of that distance learning digital divide looked like? And across the country, we found that there's about 16 million kids out of the estimated 51 million public school students in the distance learning digital divide. That's a huge chunk. We also found that no state was immune to this problem, that even in the best states, you'd have 1 in 4 students that were left in the distance learning digital divide. We also found that there were about 400,000 teachers across the United States that were in the distance learning digital divide, preventing them from standing up really robust distance learning options and making it harder for them to participate in all the sort of administrative pieces that they have to do. So it was a pretty big problem, in addition to getting a sense of what that size looked like, right? This is a persistent issue, right? Even if you offer somebody service for 1 month, that doesn't mean the next month they'll have service. So this is an issue that requires support ongoing. We found that the cost of closing it in the first year, remember, we expect the first year to be a bit more expensive than following years, because maybe you'll have some cost savings from things like equipment sticking around for more than 1 year. But certainly subscriptions to broadband service will continue to be a price factor, and then also could potentially increase, was about $11 billion across the country in that first year. And that was based off of the lowest possible published pricing that we could find, that even schools were being offered. So, we weren't just sort of taking sort of the retail sticker price, but we were really trying to drill down on what we thought was a reasonable cost related to both broadband service and for devices. And the reason we found, if the number sounds high and that others can tell you it could be lower, the reason it's high is because what we found was that to do distance learning in a robust way, you would need about 210. So 200 download and 10 upload Mbps. And that's because you have multiple folks in the household, potentially more than one student, or maybe a family member as well, that's going to require broadband service to do that type of distance learning work, so that you can avoid the kind of interruptions we just heard, right? Either getting kicked out of classrooms or just being unable to utilize the resources that are expected to participate in distance learning. Also, you have access to different types of supportive resources. So, the therapist or all the other wraparound resources that a school had offered, so that you can create as a school a really robust program, as opposed to just kind of any old program, right? It gives you a lot more flexibility. So that 210 number is what we're sort of basing our sort of robust or ideal distance learning need as of now. Could you do it on less? Potentially, yes. You could do it on 25.3 or something less, but you will have limited options in terms of how many students in the household can operate at the same time, disruptions that a student will experience, which can be really, really disruptive and really stop learning for an entire day potentially. And then, what type of program a school can even set up if they know that you're relying on such minimal speeds. So, that's kind of what we found in our first report. And it gave us a pretty clear understanding of the importance of infrastructure. that making sure that every community had access to sort of the robust options for broadband so that every school could stand up a robust option for their distance learning and therefore have equitable access to education. We found that there were serious gaps in the system around infrastructure deployment, and that's essentially leading to this incredible pressure on schools and families to be able to cobble together some form of access. And then when they can't, or when they can't cobble together the best form of access, they're shut out from learning opportunities. And we're already seeing evidence of that. I'm sure you've all seen lots of stories have come out just in the past few days about learning loss impacting students who have sort of this sort of patchwork quilt of distance learning options and distance learning support. And then most recently, we put together a report that looked at what schools and states have been doing. And what we found is that, schools are really trying to innovate, but they're innovating on top of an infrastructure that's just not really equitable. So, what we're seeing is that schools are forced to capture and then fill the gaps that we have in infrastructure. So maybe part of the school district will be covered with really strong infrastructure, and because the other part is not, then schools are coming up with mesh networks or paying for hotspots or trying to figure out some combination of resources to cover those areas that have been left behind because of decisions by policymakers to allow those communities to go unserved. So, we think that there's ample opportunity to fix some of these issues, because now one thing that we discovered in our report, schools are doing incredible assessments, trying to understand exactly what is the sort of broadband and broadband resource mix that students and their families have. That's really, really rich data that can be really useful to policymakers as they start to make decisions around the digital divide.
Thank you so much, Amina. I want to turn to Paul. You've been researching the digital divide, from a social justice and economic perspective, particularly in the Bay Area. Can you share what you've learned?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Paul Goodman. I'm the Technology Equity Director at the Greenlining Institute, which is located in Oakland. At Greenlining, we work to achieve economic equity for communities of color. My team works on technology issues, everything from broadband deployment to net neutrality to algorithmic equity, making sure that computerized decision-making models don't discriminate against people of color. We also have teams that do energy regulation work, environmental work, banking work, as well as health work. And when I first thought about this question, like, when did the digital divide start? My not entirely snarky answer is, well, in 1896 when the telephone was invented. But actually, if you really want to think about it, I'd say the 1930s would be a good place to point to. And that's because in the 1930s, that's when this practice, redlining, came about. The reason we're called the Greenlining Institute is because we are the solution to redlining. Redlining was a practice where the federal government asked developers to come up with what were called security maps of neighborhoods around the country. And those maps were not security maps. They were maps of where white folks and Black and brown folks lived in each community. And those maps were used to grant mortgages and insurance in areas that were predominantly white neighborhoods and deny those same financial instruments to areas where Black and brown folks live. So this caused not only there to be more investment in predominantly white neighborhoods, but the investment that should have gone to Black and brown neighborhoods also went to white neighborhoods. As a result, we saw an increasing gap in terms of Black and brown families' ability to get the same incomes as white folks, build the same wealth, and access capital. So, that's it's technically illegal, but you still see it. And you especially see it in the broadband space, because when broadband came around, internet service providers looked around and they said, well, where do we want to build our networks? And they decided we want to build in the areas that generate the highest profit. And I really want to point out, it's not areas where we generate a profit, it's the highest profit. And as a result, as they built their networks, as they upgraded their networks, and as they did maintenance on their networks, those maps, the maps of where broadband is good versus where broadband is bad, I could have saved a lot of money just by printing out a redlining map and showing that instead. We actually did a huge mapping project, so I can show you anywhere in California, if you look at places where broadband is good, there's a smaller percentage of households of color. If you look at places where broadband is bad, there's a higher percentage of households of color. Those areas, incidentally, are also the areas that are feeling the worst effects of pollution in California and the areas that are least likely to have access to clean energy. So it's a multifaceted problem. So, as a result of these business decisions by internet service providers and what I'd say insufficiently robust regulation of those internet service providers, we see a lot of folks who are unserved and underserved in urban and suburban areas. And a lot of folks try to frame this argument as about being urban versus rural, but it's really not. It's about that folks who don't have internet because it's not available or it's not sufficiently robust or they can't afford it. And I think the other key thing to think about is these are systemic issues, just like redlining created systemic issues, including the digital divide. And therefore, you can't solve this problem by going, well, we're going to target the very neediest or the folks that have absolutely no broadband service. And so what we need right now is a solution that's going to reverse decades of neglect. What unfortunately we're seeing now are a lot of sort of half measures, or what I call policy solutions that would get us to somewhere between 2005 and 2010 in terms of the broadband we need. Good news is yesterday, Senator Elena Gonzalez introduced the Broadband for All Act. It's our second pass at it, didn't quite make it this year, but we think that's going to go a very long way to start solving the problems, particularly for unserved and underserved communities. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you.
Excellent. Thanks for the history lesson. Thank you, Paul. I want to turn it over to John now to share with us kind of what initiatives the county has spearheaded. We saw San Mateo County allocated a lot of resources and funding to close the digital divide. And you talked a little about kind of, have you been partnering with school districts? Share with us what you've been doing.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here and appreciate the invitation. It's great to be on this panel as well. I always learn a lot when I'm on these panels from everyone else that speaks. And just want to share the story a little bit of San Mateo County. I agree the digital divide has been around for a while. Certainly, I grew up in a very rural area where, there wasn't really any connectivity. There's barely phone service, let alone internet connectivity. Of course, I'm older too, so maybe that was because the internet wasn't such a big thing. And I still remember the AOL CDs that got mailed out to everyone and the sound of modems. So, it's interesting now, having been the CIO in the city of San Jose, and then the CIO in the city of San Francisco, and now the CIO in San Mateo County, which is between those two, to kind of see the evolution of technology and the continued challenges with the digital divide. I think there's a lot of elements to digital equity. There's access to the equipment. Some of the speakers have already spoken to that. There's language barriers, there's training barriers. All those things are certainly important. There's application barriers, how well the applications are designed to run on devices for different people. The thing I've focused on here in the county, though, primarily has been the connectivity piece, because we can't, in my department, we don't feel like we can solve all the problems, but we feel like just having connection to the internet is an important piece. That all these other things, if you have a device, and like you were giving the example with your daughter, you can have all the knowledge and you can have all the training and device, but if you don't have a connection, that's really where the problem starts and ends sometimes. So we've been doing work in the county. We're a very large county, 580 square miles, very geographically diverse. If you're familiar with the county, the eastern side of the county, east of 280, is very urban, a lot of cities, small cities, some of them wealthy cities, you would say, like Atherton, Menlo Park, and the traditionally wealthy cities where you wouldn't expect to see digital divide challenges. And then the cities that are more, traditionally economically challenged, like Daly City and South San Francisco and smaller cities like that, that once had booming economies, but when the economy shifted and changed, are trying to rebuild and retool. Then the western side of the county is very agricultural, very mountainous or hilly, depending on what part of the country you're from, what you define as a mountain, but very hard to reach. And a lot of farms and ranches and single family dwellings, and a lot of challenges there with even cell phone coverage. I drove from Santa Cruz up to Pescadero the other day, and the minute I left Davenport going up one, I lost cell phone connectivity. I have both AT&T and Verizon. I had nothing until I got to Pescadero, right? So if you just think of it from a public safety standpoint and from a public access to the internet standpoint, everyone in between there is going to have challenges with any type of service, let alone broadband service for distance learning or telehealth and things like that. So the story I'd like to tell is just that when I joined the county 6 years ago, the Board of Supervisors recognized that we had these, even on the urban side, these underserved pockets of areas where there was needs for better internet connectivity and people couldn't afford unlimited data plans and things like that. So we started installing public Wi-Fi hotspots, if you will, high bandwidth areas like in community centers and libraries and parks and things like that, where at the time we were hoping we would create areas where people would come together and share those hotspot areas in kind of a town square, the old town square approach, because we knew we couldn't blanket the entire county with free public Wi-Fi. We put up about 100 of those spots. They're very well used. We have about 150,000 people a year, or unique devices, if you will, that connect to that SMC public Wi-Fi network. I dropped a URL in the chat if anybody wants to go look at the map of where all those sites are. And that worked really well. It's about 1 million user hours of internet use per month on that system. But then COVID came along, and so that whole idea that people would come together in shared areas to use the internet, of course, with shelter in place and children trying to learn from home and parents trying to work from home and access resources from home, really, caused this to come to the forefront. I think, we all knew and we all heard this was an issue, but when we have 100,000 roughly students in the county, when they're all trying to distance learn from home, there's kind of, they are the indicator, I think, of the families that are in need and the communities that are most in need. I feel very privileged, of course. I have 2 sons. I actually am a school board member on the school board. So I see sort of the spectrum, right? And even with my sons, like the minute they started distance learning from home, we had high-speed internet at the house that I thought was enough. They blew through that bandwidth in like 2 weeks. And I started getting messages that it wasn't enough. So we had to increase to unlimited. We had to get more bandwidth. But I have the luxury to do that, and a lot of homes don't. So we came back to the board. We have a great partnership with the San Mateo County Office of Education. We didn't want to just guess where to go next or what to do. We knew even on my school district that we were handing out hotspots and that they weren't necessarily the answer to the problem because they have fairly limited connection, bandwidth and penetration abilities into homes and things like that. And coverage areas are different. So the board set aside some money, about $6 million for us out of the CARES Act, to increase broadband accessibility across the county, more into the neighborhoods, around libraries. And the way we did that is that we signed an agreement with the school districts. We got maps from all the school districts, the data they had collected, not with students' names, but just locations of where they were reporting issues. And we created a heat map, if you will, kind of like a needs map of where all the students' needs were in the county. Not surprisingly, a lot of it's related to socioeconomic. You could almost predict where the needs are based on census tract maps of income and things like that. But it did help us focus our efforts. And so right now we're in the process of standing up close to 20 sites and working with the libraries to light up all their sites as Park and Connect sites, with the hope that we can sign an agreement with PG&E then to use light poles and things like that to go from these hub sites around the county and do hops out into the neighborhood with public Wi-Fi on street poles that will reach into the homes and give people unlimited wireless access to the internet. It's still not perfect, you know, with 580 square miles. We've already done some just preliminary estimations. It would probably cost, you know, closer to $100 million to really hit all the areas we want to hit in the county. But, you know, I think this is one of those missions that's going to be a mission of steps, not leaps, but it's a good step. And I think, you know, if anything good has come out of the pandemic in my mind, it's the fact that I think we as a community here in the county and as a society are finally recognizing that, you know, internet access in an unlimited, unfiltered, broadband type of way is not a luxury that only a few should be able to afford. It's really a basic public utility that if our expectation is to have everyone be able to access education and healthcare and jobs equally, that we as a government need to partner with the telcos, with the communities, with the cities, with the libraries and schools, with the nonprofit agencies to really figure out where the needs are and how we can effectively work together to meet those needs. I don't think, you know, that just leaving the public on their own and a few sort of token, you know, if you're lucky and sign up for this, you know, subsidized program, maybe we'll get you something that'll meet your needs is really the best way to go. I think all these other programs are great that the telcos have put in place, and we've actually leveraged some of them. But I think we as a society and we as a community really need to address the fact that just like roads and water and electricity, that it's a basic need now that everyone should have equal access to and equal right to, and that we should invest. And I know $100 million sounds like a lot of money to do public Wi-Fi for a county, but when you compare that to a county or city budget of what gets spent in government on other types of things, it's really just a small portion of it. And when you see how critical internet access is, I think it's a wise investment. So I'm proud to work for the county, and I'm happy we're making some steps in the right direction. It's a challenge like anything. When you're dealing with so many stakeholders, it's not always easy to move things forward as quickly as we'd like, but we're making good progress. We just did a little press release the other day about some areas in East Palo Alto that we bring internet access to. So I'm just really happy, even if it's just one small pocket at a time, that we're making progress and making things better.
Excellent. Thank you, John, for you know, trying to promote partnership, which is something that, you know, I know Thrive and also SIAG advocate. I want to turn it over to Nancy. Nancy, you've been researching and studying education for many years now, and particularly that intersection with technology. What have we learned that makes for good teaching with respect to technology? And, you know, what are we going to see in the future?
Great. Thanks so much, Maya, and it's a pleasure being with all of you today. As Maya mentioned, I'm the co-founder of a national research and development fund that focuses on innovation and education. And we're seeing a lot of that happening now as a necessity because of COVID. So what makes for good learning for an individual student will actually vary significantly depending on the individual learning style, their academic readiness, even before the pandemic has set in, and other factors. But the most important thing for good teaching during this technology age is to meet all the students wherever they are, regardless of what their situation is, and provide as individualized as possible of instruction to really reverse the learning losses that have been piling up since March. As Amina shared earlier, foundationally, we need to make sure that all students have access to a device, reliable Wi-Fi, but then also supporting tools. We have learned a lot that headphones are necessary for many students to be able to participate in virtual classes because they need to cancel out background noises and focus, because we're finding more and more that students are likely sharing spaces with other family members who are also trying to work from home, and they don't necessarily have a dedicated room where they can concentrate without headphones. We've also learned that, meanwhile, on the other side, teachers are working incredibly hard to try to replicate what they have been doing in classrooms in all the years before, to try to translate that online. But it's actually important to shift away from that thinking of how do we take everything that happened in the classroom and just put it on Zoom, and really actually think about how we adapt to make it the best learning environment possible. And so a few approaches, there's really 3 key approaches that have come up, but there are many more that are individualized to each student. But some of the 3 most common themes that we're hearing a lot is the first is the flexibility with learning time and scheduling. So one of the benefits of online learning is the ability to be more flexible with schedules. And that's actually necessary to meet the needs of all the families, because we have families who are not home during the day because they are essential workers and they're not able to support their students. We still have students sharing devices and not able to participate in live classes at the same time. So teachers really need to encourage stronger autonomy and engagement by setting up different options for families between the live synchronous learnings that also works better for some students to be directly live with the instructor, or some of the asynchronous learning options. And for many families, we're actually finding a combination of those are what really works out. We're also starting to see data on the first report cards, from the first trimester and first quarter across the countries, and they have been indicating that many students are really suffering from learning losses, much of that due to simply lack of participation and inability to be able to participate and turn in assignments that are due at very specific times. So students need much more flexibility in when they need to do work, and should be working with much longer term deadlines and flexible options to demonstrate their competency, rather than being graded on something that needs to be done within a specific 45-minute class on a specific day, because simply the infrastructure doesn't allow all students to be on and be able to turn in something that's on that specific time slot, the same way you would be if you had a math test on a Wednesday when you're all in school together. That doesn't translate as well when we're in a virtual environment. So aside from that first pillar of flexibility with timing and schedule, the second is a stronger integration with technology apps, particularly in the elementary and middle school years. Much of the core content for subjects such as reading and math can be actually heavily reinforced with high quality technology applications that can help everything from acquiring early phonics skills to reinforcing arithmetic fluency. In fact, actually, many school districts had been using these apps with students in school buildings during specific times when school was in session. But given that we are now in this virtual environment, students and families really should be given direct access to these apps, and many have started to get them, but encouraged to use them much more frequently on their own to complement what is going on in the classroom. So meanwhile, teachers should be using the student data that they're learning from these tools to identify areas for intervention, and also to focus their own instruction, because they're able to see where students are spending more of their time, where they're struggling through these complementary tools. And the last one that we're finding more and more research on is the need for high dose tutoring. There's been several recent analyses that's been showing that learning losses suffered from COVID is significantly higher than the equivalent amount of learning losses during a summer melt that students typically go through. But given that not only is this COVID learning loss dramatically longer, it's actually much harsher, and the impact of it could be potentially long-term damage to our most vulnerable students, including those from low-income families, particularly those with disabilities and English language learners. So one of the proven solutions that we've seen that have addressed summer melt in the past that we think can be highly applicable in this COVID learning environment is high dose tutoring, which could be done one-on-one or in small groups, but it can be done virtually. So we can really access tutors from all around the country, so they're not limited by geography, but they can also be accessed by their expertise. It can be done. It can also be done in person for those options of hybrid learnings, or in school options for students who are able to go back. But high dose tutoring, where they're done individually or in small groups, will really be able to allow students to be targeted in the areas that they have gaps, and really address those learning gaps as quickly as possible. That type of tutoring needs to happen during the school year, both as part of the regular school day and outside of school hours, because of this time flexibility we talked about, but especially during the summer that we're going to be coming up on because of all the learning losses that have happened since March. This high dose tutoring will need to happen throughout the school year as well as the summer.
Excellent, thank you. I should note that Nancy will be working with the new administration on, I presume, some of these solutions. So we're looking forward to, we have a good person who's going to be helping us there. I want to close out with Susan. So tell us, what are the California Emerging Technology Fund strategies to close the digital divide? I know we want to move to the positive, so maybe you have some good news for us.
Good morning. Well, the first good news really is that we have this moment, and there's no need to let a crisis go to waste. We have so many people focused on the digital divide, which really isn't new. And in fact, when we started in 2007, it was hard to get people to, understand that there was a digital divide, because so many people were like, well, isn't this old? Haven't we addressed this? And unfortunately, that's just not the case. And as we develop, our society and move everything, both, sort of upfront and infrastructure behind the scenes to the internet, it's like there isn't much we do that doesn't touch the internet. That, divide continued to grow. And it's the, additional good news is, right, it's the COVID has laid this divide bare, and it's not, a stream, it's not small, it looks like the Grand Canyon, and people understand that. A lot of people understand that personally, and others, certainly understand it through compassion and just general observation. While we are focused on education in this discussion, let me just note that in California, the 9 million people who are on the wrong side of the digital divide, that only 1/3 of them are students. The majority of our poor population in California are adults without children. And the almost entire attention is focused on kids. Now, I think it's a great focus. I don't want to take anything away from it, but we need to expand our concepts and make room for everyone that is involved or affected by the digital divide. So with that said, I also will say, I guess, that it is clear that the opportunity before us now does require systemic change, and very hard look at how we do business, whether we're talking private sector, public sector, nonprofit. It's, how our systems support growth and development, whether of people, of the economy, right? And what choices do we want to make consciously about our systems? And everything won't happen overnight, right? And John, I think, was right. I mean, partnership is important, working across stakeholder groups, right? Not operating just in a single silo, right? Recognizing the diversity in sort of all its forms, whether it's race, gender, line of work, all these different things that really matter, and trying to figure out how we need to think about them differently, so that in 10 years, we're not having the same discussion about a new technology. Okay. So at the California Emerging Technology Fund, we were started in 2007 by the California Public Utilities Commission out of mergers, AT&T and SBC, Verizon and MCI, a name probably some people don't even know, and others we just haven't heard for a long time. In California, we are fortunate that there was foresight at one point that said when mergers happen among regulated industries, that there has to be a public benefit, right? Because companies are claiming they're saving money or they're making things better. And So the state law says there has to be a public benefit. In the case of communications, the Public Utility Commission decides what that is. And in 2007, with those mergers, they, instead of giving everybody 35 cents back on their phone bills, they left it intact, and it was a 45 million from the AT&T SBC merger, 15 million from the Verizon MCI merger. So a total of 60 million, which for a state like California really isn't very much. We have had successive funding from other mergers since then, because frankly, we expected to go out of business in 10 years. That would have been 2017. And we do expect it to still go out of business. That is our mission. With systems changed, with more people connected, with, leaving institutionalized ways of working through these issues that are healthier for California. So we have a number of strategies. I'll just give you a quick highlight of them as we go through. And then I think you also got in your handouts, the what we call the Digital Equity Bill of Rights. And so I want to draw your attention to that as well. But in terms of strategies, we do the traditional grant making, right, around digital divide. And we are focused on that side, on the adoption side, in terms of helping people, finding ways to help people to subscribe to affordable internet. We have pressured the companies to offer affordable rates. That's between $10 and $23. They're not the magic bullet, but they help. Part of our problem there now is the companies make it very difficult if somebody, actually figures out those affordable rates exist. One of the things that we have learned through our annual surveys about where the digital divide is that of the population that doesn't know, that doesn't have internet at home, 70% of them don't know about affordable rates. And the companies, with few exceptions, don't promote that those are available. And then once you get to them, it's difficult. Nonetheless, we work in that area and do provide grants. Engaging civic leaders. Like I said, Rose Jacobs Gibson here. We have a partnership with Rose at Hagar and El Concilio to try and reach out to institutions and nonprofit community organizations that are trusted messengers that reach into the community and work day to day with low-income population and provide information, provide referrals to different places about getting connected and identifying issues that we then need to feed back in. We have public policy initiatives. We are involved in the policy process. And Paul mentioned one of the bills that's coming out this session. We expect this next session, which started yesterday, so we're on a biennial session, right, for California, the next 2 years to be the session of broadband. There are currently 9 bills that will be out this week. And we hope at the end of the day, to be supporting all of them. There are a number of opportunities there to address a wide range of issues, including tribal lands, which lack, in some cases, electricity still, but in many cases, lack viable internet. So there are lots of opportunities there. Someone asked in the chat, is money the only issue? And no, absolutely not. It's an important piece, and we think that there's $1 billion that's needed over time, not a lot of time, but that is needed to address the issue. So there is serious money that is needed. But a lot of it is about, policy changes that don't require money or, restructuring. The other piece is public awareness and education, right? So that people are aware of what their options are and what realistic options there are, not, sort of bait and switch options, if you will. And then strategic partnerships with companies, with elected officials, with school districts, with our anchor institutions on what can change to help move the larger issue forward. We know the digital divide is really a proxy as well for the economic divide, for the opportunity divide, because it's related to the internet. So we also work in the telehealth area and in education. We have a program, we can stick the link in chat. We're not going to have time to go through it all now, called School to Home. And it's a incubator, if you will. We work with some of the poorest districts in California and in their lowest performing schools. The focus has been not only to close the digital divide, but to close the achievement gap. And it is not simply a matter of dropping in money. It's not simply a matter of dropping in technology. If you drop in technology to a dysfunctional situation, it doesn't get better, right? If anything, it may get worse. There's a cultural change that's required in terms of education and how classrooms work, how teaching works. That technology can help. But what we learned when we started working with School to Home, we have essentially three basic principles there. One is that you work with the principal and the staff first and help them understand the role of technology in their school culture and in the classroom. And what we learned consistently is that 30 to 40% of the teachers weren't comfortable with technology. Some didn't even have an email account, right? And their focus was very, traditional to their education. And, you may think these are older teachers, and some of them were, but not all of them, okay? The next piece of it is really educating the parents. And that is the key to improved education and closing the achievement gaps. How do you help parents understand the role they play in their children's education, and not conceptually, right? Like Elena was talking about earlier, she's in there talking to the school. This isn't the first time she's been to the school, I'm sure. I don't know her, but from her story, you can tell she is an engaged parent. And it's hard to do when you're working multiple jobs, right? And if you're a single parent. But the technology allows you to extend those opportunities to translate if English isn't your first language. But you have to have somebody who's receptive on the other end. Do they reply, right? Are they scared of the technology and don't really understand the translation piece either? Do they put the information out there about what the homework is, what the grades are? Right. I mean, it goes on and on, just a few examples. And then you introduce the technology to the child, right? Parents have to understand how to manage that technology in their child's education, right? From interacting with the school, but also interacting with the child. Like any process of raising, children, there have to be rules, there have to be boundaries, there have to be agreements about how the technology works, in your home. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be different home to home, and that's okay, right? In schools, we're so used to everything being the same and everybody have to doing this exactly this way. And we're, clearly in this environment where that's just not possible. Right. But it doesn't mean education's impossible, right? So, sorry, let me get off that hang of right now and just take you quickly, because I know we want to have time for question and answer to a couple things. One is the digital Bill of Rights, which is on our website. But like I said, I think you got in your packet. And the Digital Equity Bill of Rights tries to set down a framework that's both appropriate locally in the state and nationally. And we are looking forward to new opportunities, of course, nationally. One thing, sorry, I will say, last piece about education is right now in this moment, we are trying just to make things work. And we have done some extraordinary lifts to get technology to folks, including internet. But if we are looking at, let me say it this way, is our direction for the policy of California that school districts should pay for internet at home for people, right, for their students? So personally, I think that's not where we want to go, right? We'd be looking at adding almost $1 billion just to the education budget. And to the educators here, I'm sure you can think of other things where that money, other places where that money needs to be spent, right? We can have national policy that is inclusive and get service, quality service to where it needs to go, and at a price that's fair. And that's what the Digital Equity Bill of Rights embodies, and goes through 10 different points that we think are incredibly important to our democracy, as well as our economy and education.
Thank you, Susan. I want to get to some of the questions that I have and some that are in the chat. There was a question on kind of industry solutions. I know we have a few participants and people in the audience who are from industry. Might I hear from them, or if the panelists are aware of some excellent industry solutions from the internet service providers, maybe Google and Facebook, or others that are looking promising, maybe from our audience, if they can speak up.
So I will just note that I think industry has done, industry is a big term. So I think there are a lot of different groups that are not nonprofits, that are not government, that have stepped into the fold and tried to provide some form of support, certainly when it comes to students, but also for non-students as well that are in the digital divide. And that's been really good to see. I think it demonstrates how this issue is resonating with people, especially because the pandemic has really opened their eyes to the value of it. Because if you can't stay home, then you can't be socially distanced, and it makes it harder for us to keep our numbers down when it comes to the pandemic. So I think everybody is starting to understand the sort of the network effects of having access to the internet in a very real way. That said, I mean, I think, if we took this back in time and said, how are we going to build roads? Like, can we just rely on, the love of one-offs from charity or from industry? I think you would laugh at it, right? This is underlying infrastructure, and the issue is, a commitment from government to make sure that everybody has access to it. You can't expect industry to do it on their own. There has to be a partnership between government really demonstrating where the need is when the market is finished doing its work. And so you have to be able to see where we need to step in with additional resources and work together as a community through government to actually close those gaps. And so because it's such a big, and I think, sort of underlying issue that is sort of at the base of so many services that now sit on top, this is something that I think takes, certainly efforts from state government that are sustained and committed but then also, potentially efforts from federal government to be able to support those efforts in the long run. So I think it takes much more than what charitable institutions and I think private institutions that are offering their support can do. I mean, it's wonderful to see them doing that in the short term, but I think we really have an opportunity to look at sort of long-term change.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
I would double click on that. And I also think like ultimately, the only solution is going to be communities own their own broadband infrastructure. That's the only way we're going to get it out to everybody. It's actually a wildly successful model to have the community own the infrastructure and then have internet service providers bid on providing service over that. There's one town, I can never remember the name, but they have something like 12 different internet service providers. I've never been able to confirm it, but apparently if you're not happy with your internet service provider, you go to the website, you click the drop-down menu, you click on your new internet service provider and you're transferred instantly. And the amazing thing is in this town, at one point, one of the internet service providers said, we know we have low income households here. So we're gonna sell you guys broadband for, it was like $1.80 a month. That only lasted a day because the next day, one of their competitors said, I'll give it to you for free. So yeah, that's the way to do it, is to make sure, just like we have control over our roads, over our sewers, that we have control over our broadband infrastructure.
I think what's really interesting about Paul's point too is that the benefits that flow from competition also start to speak to some of the points that others have made about digital inclusion, right? If you have a provider that has to compete on something other than the connection because they're sharing the actual underlying infrastructure, then what you're competing on are things like cost or quality of service or and by service, I mean all the sort of myriad things. So like IT support or customer service in multiple languages, digital inclusion support. There's so many different ways that providers can start to compete to draw in sort of the specialized customers that might be in that region. And so if you don't have that competition, then you just sort of have a provider that's like, well, come or not, there's no other choice. And so I think there's incredible value to actually not just offering folks who are that lack connectivity to, high quality internet, upgraded internet, or some, not just some form of internet, but real upgraded internet. We know right now for educational, to access second grade, you need 210. I'm not talking about supercomputing. So, we want to make sure those networks are everywhere. But then also, wouldn't it be wonderful if the people who had access to those networks had access to multiple providers so that they could compete on all these different other types of offerings, so that you had a much more robust experience that was really meeting your needs. You had somewhere else to go when one provider wasn't doing its job. I think that's really valuable too. And it helps us understand why competition matters, as well as things like speed and underlying infrastructure.
Great, thank you. I want to ask a question to Jose and Elena. How, it's very easy for those of us who are not in the digital divide to talk about and try to resolve it, but how can we engage more of those individuals who are in the digital divide to tell us what they're experiencing and to raise their voices?
Entonces, la pregunta, María Elena, fue ¿cómo podemos incluir a más personas, más individuos a través de la división digital para que se pueda escuchar las voces de ellos y para que las organizaciones puedan escuchar las voces de los padres?
Pues yo pienso que a través de nuestros amigos cercanos, comunicar, ver, por ejemplo, yo tengo mi cuñada que ella no sabe nada de la tecnología, entonces yo la contacto con ciertas personas que la pueden ayudar. También tengo mis vecinos, entonces como las personas que conocemos más cercanos y así poder ir agarrando más y más personas. Nosotros, por ejemplo, en Innovate, pues eso es lo que hacemos. Nos conectamos unos con otros y Y así es como ha funcionado, que Innovate nos está ayudando mucho a que nosotros podamos avanzar como padres, avanzar en la tecnología para ayudarle a nuestros hijos.
Yeah, just connecting people with resources. Myself, sometimes I've been, my sister-in-law, she has a lot of issues with the technology and she doesn't know how to use it. And some of the things that I do is I go there and I explain her how to log in into like meetings and everything. And I do the same with my neighbors. I kind of support them with the technology and how they can use it. One of the things that Innovate has been doing is that they're been helping us to create Zoom's accounts and how to get access to the technology and connecting us with resources, and also for us as parents to know how we can move forward with technology and understand what technology is. Thank you, Madalena, for sharing that. Gracias, Madalena.
¿Puedo decir algo más?
Yeah.
También pienso de que en las escuelas deberían de organizar workshops, ¿cómo se dice? Deberían de organizar talleres para que identificar a los padres, porque las escuelas tienen identificados cuáles son los padres que pueden tener acceso o que saben usar la tecnología, cuáles padres no saben usar la tecnología. Entonces también sería como un trabajo de parte de las escuelas también.
I also think that the schools should be a little more intentional on recognize which parents can use and cannot use the technology, and create workshop for them, workshop for the parents who are not tech savvy, and so parents can understand better and get knowledge in technology. Thank you, Madalena. And I think from Innovate side, yeah, as Madalena was sharing, we've been helping lots of parents to create their Gmail account, create their Zoom account. And I think that's, is the basic. And I think it's one of the first steps. Like, first of all, people need to, like, we can have all the resources, but if people don't know how to use those resources, they're useless. And at Innovate, we've been focusing a lot on helping parents to navigate all the technology possible, like how to log into a board meeting, Zoom board meeting, and how to access to, different meetings that happens at the school, like teachers, conference with teachers and conference with principals. So making sure that parents understand how to use that. And then once we understand that, it's when the resources come to the table. Like, okay, now this parent understands this, like what are the resources that this parent can use, to have better access to the information. And I think also information is key. Like, if parents are not aware of the resources out there in the community, and if they're not in their language, whether they speak Spanish or other language besides English, like, it is important for them to have access to that information, so they understand they can go to different organizations, county offices, like, so parents can get informed and get access to those resources. And we see, like, obviously there's a lot of organizations out there that are doing a lot of work on this. But the advertising, it's something, that we cannot hear from other parents. Like, parents will tell me, like, hey, I'm going to this place, and I'm like, okay, can I share that resource with the group? And it's like, yeah, sure, because we probably never heard from that resource. So it is very important for organizations to be intentional on this communication, intentional to engage people, intentional on making sure that people know how to use the resources, because you can give them, the best MacBook to a parent. But if the MacBook is in English and that parent doesn't speak English, like, that's useless. You can have the best Wi-Fi and everything, but like, if the parent or families don't know how to use it, just, we're not doing anything. So making sure that parents, we teach parents that they use the technology and the right use of technology as well.
Great. Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Elena. I want to give an opportunity to some of those in the audience who might have some knowledge, specialized knowledge, or working on initiatives that are important to address this situation. I'm going to call out a few people. Is it Eli or Ellie who has been some interesting information in the chat if you want to speak?
It's Eli.
Eli, great, thank you.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Eli. I'm retired cabinet secretary for state of California. I ran the Department of Information Technology, had the privilege to work on exactly what we're talking about decades ago, 1999 to 2003. The bottom line is the resources, the funding. The state had ideas and concepts of pulling all this together and building a broadband network across state, but it didn't want to make a mandate of it because it would have to fund it, and there was not sufficient funding at the time to make that commitment. So that's the problem. Is there's three major areas that we got to talk about. One is the funding or the resources. Second would be the leadership and the collaboration and the partnerships. And then third would be incentivizing the industry. In those days, we incentivized the telecommunications entities and gave them a lot of leeway to really invest in this area. And as Paul Goodman found out, they invested in their best interest, not in the community's best interest. That's a problem. I think John's headed in the right direction as it relates to San Mateo County. City of San Jose tried to do smart cities quite a few decades ago, and then they got pushed back in many areas, and there was a lot of challenges that didn't get anywhere. City of San Diego is trying the same thing. The City of Las Vegas is trying the same thing under the smart cities models. What we need to do is a combination of what Susan brought up, what Paul brought up, and what John brought up is that we have to create municipal, actually regional partnerships. So part of the industry that's sitting on a gold mine that I believe is a immediate solution, and taking the concept from the Coachella Valley school districts where they ran buses and put routers on their buses. Obviously they didn't reach everybody, but at least it was, a lot of people called it a Band-Aid, but at least they did an attempt. We need to do the same thing as it relates to public-private partnerships where the local city is working with the local school district, is working with the utility. In this case, I'm in Southern California, so the example would be Southern California Edison. And the utilities, most of the utilities own most of the street lighting. So mesh networks backhauled to fiber backbones is a possible solution without waiting decades for broadband to reach the home. And we're working with AT&T, we're working with Aruba, we're working with Cisco and a couple other entities with 5 small cities. And I'm focusing on the small cities because they're in the biggest need right now. Most of them are disadvantaged communities and they have the biggest need. And so because of COVID-19, we've finally got school district boards talking to city councils, which was a challenge statewide in the past. So I agree that COVID-19 is an opportunity to open our eyes, but we need to engage. And I think the leadership is what's really going to make the difference. So for example, the legislation that's being attempted to drive the broadband solution, there's always going to be pushback from the telcos and the industry that doesn't want it. At the federal level, municipalities are trying to put Wi-Fi mesh networks, and then the federal level locked them down to $175 per pole to lease out back to the telcos so that they, the city and or the utility could benefit from that investment that they were going to implement it. So again, there's policy work that needs to get done at the state level, working with the CPUC and making sure that PG&E, SCE, and San Diego Gas Electric are proactively cooperating. So coincidentally, I was scanning through SCE's newest program. They have a new program where they're offering fiber, believe it or not, which is a good thing. But the problem is, when you look at it from a city perspective, they're not proactively working with that city to allow access to their poles to build a mesh network that could solve an immediate need. Now, it doesn't bring broadband to the home, but it gets the connectivity for those kids that have zero access at this point. And so the biggest component or other part that needs to be brought in are the unions. Most school districts have labor unions that have always brought up concerns on anything technology.
Eli, I have to cut you off because we only have a couple more minutes. But thank you. You have, it's great having that historical context for us. I want to ask Mike Plesha, you said that you had some brief comment about how to procure broadband in an effective way.
Right, so we're working with...
Actually, I'm asking Mike Plesha to go on. Mike?
You're muted.
There we go. Hi, everyone. So I work for a firm that has a global footprint, and we do, as the title might imply, we help clients drive better operating expenses, and telecom broadband happens to be one of our sweet spot areas. And from a best practices perspective, most for those organizations, small organizations that are forced to go to the marketplace on their own, they lack any sort of competitive advantage with regard to understanding marketplaces and also understanding really how to bargain more aggressively. So one of the things that we're seeing around the country, particularly in certain municipal school districts and what have you, they band together and they create their own collective bargaining organizations that are ad hoc, but they go to market to create competitive tension amongst the providers because they have a bigger piece of pie, if you will, to offer the suppliers, and that helps them drive better cost structures.
Great, thank you, Mike. We're right at the end. We went for a lot longer than we anticipated, but we had such great information from not only our panelists, but also some questions and some suggestions in the chat, which we will collate. I'm going to kind of formally thank our panelists, Jose, Elena, Amina, Paul, John, Nancy, and Susan. I also want to thank Petra and Georgia for helping organize this, this awesome panel. And as Petra said in the chat, for those of you who want to chat longer, we will stay on for a bit. Georgia, did you want to say a few words for those who have to drop off?
Just wanted to say thank you, Maya. Thank you to all our panelists. We are going to stop the recording now. That way you can just chat casually. And just wanted to mention one more thing, which is that Thrive has been participating in conversations countywide on the digital divide. And what today's goal was to deepen that conversation and to move towards some action. So Thrive will be thinking about how we can follow up with all of you in a meaningful way to actually make some changes. So that is the end of our program, and please do stay. And thanks again for all of you attending.